Hi, this is Lee from Prince Party UK, and this is the PPUK Podcast. I have the pleasure of interviewing Sam Jennings, art director and webmaster for Prince between 1998 and 2007. Did I get that right?
Yes, that's
Yes. Not that I've been cyber stalking you or anything like that,
right.
but I do have my Paisley Park mug here,
Well,
and
all
I
right.
know, and I believe we both have a big fan of Star Wars going by your Instagram account.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So how did you join the Prince world? How did it all come about? How did the
Sure.
journey start?
Yeah, so in the 90s, when I was in college, the internet was just becoming a thing. And so I kind of latched onto it and started getting into web design and trying to figure it out and used it to connect to other Prince fans, especially living in Chicago, where I was from. So um, building websites, building fan websites, Prince fan websites, connecting with other Prince fans. That's really what I was doing a lot on the internet in the 90s. And so Prince at that time was very interested in the internet, and especially, you know, his usual thing about going around the record labels and connecting directly to fans. And so he just started to try and experiment with that. And one of his first projects was Love for One Another charity website, and he got a bunch of fans together to work on that together. And I was part of one of the groups that was working on that site. And eventually, um, I was pretty much the only one who was doing web design full time.
Yeah.
So when the time came for him to move on to another project, he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, I have other ideas about selling music and using the internet more as a distribution tool instead of just the charity stuff. Would you help me work on that?" And so that's when we started doing NPG Online LTD and then NPG Music Club. So that's really how it started. I just kind of knew fans in the community who were through doing web design, and got connected that way.
I should have really give you the heads up before the interview, but my background is web design, graphic design, and Prince and his websites and some of your work was a big influence on me and the career path that I took. And
That's
I was
awesome.
I was very, very lucky, but I always loved what he done and what he envisioned. And I did a degree in graphic design and web design, and I ended up working in the video game industry.
Oh yeah.
But you saying about building websites and connecting with Prince fans, that's currently my job at the moment is, connecting with Prince fans and we've been very lucky. We've built up a really good community now. And what I've done from all the Prince stuff is I've built my skill set up by doing all of the stuff on this, as a fan, and it's helped me immensely. So when we talked about who would we like to interview for the podcast, you was like top of my list, and I was worried it's
Well,
like
thank
if I
you.
spoke to you, I would be like I was worried that we would end up talking about Flash files and Adobe and HTML and
Right.
but everyone said, "Oh no, you'd be the best person to speak to him about." So, but yeah, I loved a lot of your work, so I'm a huge fan. So,
Well, thank you.
apologize. I apologize if I geek out at all. So,
That's awesome. That's
but
good to hear. Thank you.
MPG Music Club, it was so ahead of its time, and this is the discussions that I've had within the community that he was just so far ahead, and one of the first artists to sell his music online, streaming his music videos online. How was it for you to do that, and how did your skill set evolve from that?
Hmm. Yeah. So a lot of people kind of forget the context of when the MPG Music Club started. It was we were living in a post Napster world where people were very afraid of file sharing, and the record labels in particular were very afraid of file sharing, and there was a very big anti-internet push going on where people just, and this is before iTunes, even this is before
Yeah,
iPods, before all that. So people hadn't really figured it out yet how best to use the internet. And so Prince of course, for a long time at that point, even he'd been, railing against record labels and their control of all the channels that they had between the artist and his audience. And so I think he really saw an opportunity with the internet to circumvent that, to go directly to fans, which is something he really craved and really wanted. I was talking to somebody else, and I was saying that in a way, the NPG Music Club was like, besides a music distribution system, it was also like the Patreon of its time,
Yeah.
because it allowed fans to give money directly to Prince, to say, hey, I support you directly, I want your music, and he would just give it directly to the fans. So I think that was definitely the part that was ahead of its time, certainly. Like he didn't think about, like, well, all the technical details. He just saw an opportunity.
Yeah, and in terms of the technicality of it, how was it very easy to do? I remember when MPG Music Club came on, and I bought my subscription, and I remember just navigating it. It was almost like an RPG game of
Right.
trying to find things and navigate. Oh, there's the studio, and then and for me, I was trying to find, is there something I've missed, and just clicking on loads of different things. How easy was that to do?
Well, it definitely evolved and changed. I mean, I think it was kind of a learning process for me too, to try and figure out what the best way to do it was. And we tried different models in different years and different formats. And the house idea, where you were walking around this space, that came about around the second year. And I think Prince had always kind of culturally been about creating a space, like creating another sort of universe, right? Like with his stage shows and with his movies.
Yeah.
And I think it was sort of the same thing. Like, he wanted to create this space where the MPG could kind of be and exist, and people could feel like they were, more connected to a community. So I think that's kind of where the ideas of the house came around. And technically, I mean, I think he really did want it to be like a 3D thing that you move around and zoom through. But, the technology and this internet speeds just weren't there at the time. People forget that it was still a dial-up universe at that point. We didn't have broadband, and especially with an international audience, we had fans who were in remote areas that had very limited access. So we couldn't go too crazy with like huge files.
Keeping the file sizes down. Yeah. I can relate. Yeah, it's just it was just such a, and obviously you won a Webby Award. Dare I ask, did you get to keep it, or did Prince get to keep the Webby Award?
No, he actually got his own. So
all right,
he got one for a Lifetime Achievement Award, and then he also got one for the NPG Music Club. And so I made sure that I got my own, and that he got his, and his stayed at Paisley Park, and mine stayed at my house. So I still have it. Yes.
That's awesome. You have to share a picture of that. I'd like to share that. It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, I wonder if I have it sitting around. No, I don't think I do. But
but that's the thing, though. For me, I don't think Prince. I don't know if you'll agree with me or not. I don't think Prince gets the credit for the what he achieved with his online presence. He opened the door. He was one of the very, very first, like you said, connecting to fans directly, and almost like the Patreon kind of model of fans funding him. And it was such a he was definitely ahead of his time. And I don't think everyone's saying he's one of the greatest musicians of all time, but for his embrace of the internet and technology for that time, it was quite setting the standard. And I think a lot of people followed after that. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that I did during that time too is I went to internet conferences, and I would be a part of panels and talks and things like that. And I would say to people that it seems like it's easy for Prince because he's a superstar, blah blah blah, but it's a model that could work for anybody. It's just a matter of what your goal is. If your goal is to get your music out to people who enjoy it, then the model can work for anybody. If your goal is to be on the cover of magazines and doing all these fancy red carpet things, that's a whole other game that is separate from that. So, that model of connecting directly to fans and selling music directly to fans, I think it could work for anybody. And certainly he was advocating that. He was advocating more artist control of their music, more artist control of what they're about, and less relying on record labels to do everything like how it used to be. And I think that has definitely changed now. I think artists have a lot more opportunities and a lot more choices when it comes to getting their music out.
And how they distribute it. And obviously the Taylor Swift and the Spotify things that have happened, over the years and stuff like that. It's been definitely interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
You also had you worked on a lot of album covers and a lot of the artwork, and like one of my favorite tour books is the 21 Nights tour books. How did you go from the website stuff to the art direction stuff?
Well, Prince and I, we over the years we kind of built up a working relationship, and it started very small, where I was connecting with him mostly through online chats and things like that, and then eventually, as we got more comfortable with each other, Steve Park was still around, and Steve was still doing great stuff, and I think at some point Steve just kind of got busy with other projects. It wasn't quite working out for him to come out all the time. And so Prince started saying, well, is that something you could do? And he gave me the opportunity to give it a shot. And of course I jumped at it, and came to Paisley, and I started doing small things here and there. I did some singles. And then I think my first big project was the One Night Alone box set, where that was, he had already gotten Afshin Shahidi as his tour photographer. And so we had all these great photos from the tour, and he wanted to do a live set, and he tapped me to be the one to put it all together into a box. And that's really just kind of how it evolved. Like, he's just saying, hey, I have a need, you could do it, right? And I said, yeah, and jumping in, and then it working out.
There's a little part of me that's getting slightly envious there. I would have loved to have done that, yeah. But obviously that's been reissued this year as well. So did the estate reach out to you, or?
Yeah, I started, Sony did the reissues, and I started working with them around 3121 and Planet Earth. They were going to reissue those, and they brought me on as a consultant to give them art files and kind of clean things up a little bit. And that worked out well. So then when time came to reissue the box set, they thought that I would be the best person to do that, because it was such a big project, and there were so many moving parts to it. There was just a ton of material. So who best to do it than me, who did it originally, and also to kind of, keep the spirit of what we did back in 2002, and keep the spirit of Prince's intentions, what his goal was with the box set, and like how to kind of update that, but at the same time respect, his vision of how that box set was. So, I was very fortunate that Sony tapped me to do that, and the estate, and was very grateful.
Did you have a lot of the original files on backup, or did they have access to it, or how did
they actually didn't have anything?
Oh, right.
Yeah, they didn't have any of the files. So I kept everything. I keep all my digital files. So I have everything that I ever worked on from then.
It's a good working process.
Yeah, and it's like every once in a while you have to move it to a new storage medium, because back then there were SideQuest discs and zip discs and all kinds of crazy things.
The big green zip discs.
Yeah,
the big ones.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
So I burned everything to DVDs, and like those degenerate too. So I got to transfer things off of that. So yeah, I made a point of saving everything. So then when they were opening Paisley Park, I gave them a bunch of stuff. For 3121, I gave them a bunch of stuff, and then for the box set, I had everything. So it was definitely no problem. I didn't have the same issue that Steve Park had with Emancipation, where things were just gone.
Yeah, that's the thing. Always back up your artwork.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, more of a geeky question. I love the T-shirt, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
With the album and the single artwork, was that in Photoshop or Quark, or I'm just trying to think of what packages were used back in.
Yeah, like, so back then it was a Quark world, so everything was in
Yeah.
Quark. That was pretty much the standard. So, doing the more creative imagery in Photoshop and then bringing it into Quark to kind of put it all together with text and everything like that. So yeah, it was definitely a Quark universe back then.
I do
Now
apologize
I'm
for the
doing
geeky
everything.
questions.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, now I'm doing everything in InDesign. So now it's in
Yeah,
InDesign.
that's a big requirement now. A lot of people in terms of the design world are asking, obviously the big one, Photoshop, but now obviously InDesign for magazines
Yeah.
and artwork and stuff like that. So out of all the projects that you worked on, was there any particular favorite, or was there any artwork or design that you really liked?
Yeah, definitely my favorite has to be the 3121 album. That was an album that I felt like I really got to see evolve and change. It was kind of a 2-year project. Like pretty much right after the musicology tour, he started investing in Paisley Park again, getting it up to speed, and then going out to LA a lot and throwing these parties. And the 3121 album started out as Lotus Flower, and so I did a whole package for Lotus Flower with just song titles and imagery. And the original cover for that got used for the Influence mural. It's the one where he's standing on the guitar and he's got his arms out. That was the original cover for Lotus Flower.
Right.
And it changed. There was a song on there called 3121, then that became the title, and that was his house out in LA. And so, he moved houses, he changed the track list. There was going to be a movie, there wasn't going to be a movie. There was just so much involved in that project that I got to see firsthand that I really felt really connected to that record. And the album cover, I really just enjoyed that. I saw the picture that Afshin had taken.
Such a great picture.
Yeah, and I thought, that's a perfect cover. It's like, it's a silhouette, perfect silhouette. It's got the album title right there. We don't need to have Prince doing sexy face to the camera. It's like, we have enough of that. Like,
yeah,
it just really, it just felt like a really, understated and great picture. So that, even though everything else about the booklet changed and the package changed, that cover stayed the same for a long time. And I was really happy that it made it to the final release too.
And then obviously having the artwork in Vegas and stuff like that, and on the billboards, as an artist, that must be amazing to see. And you must have got a lot of pleasure out of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, Vegas was crazy just because they have they do these things all the time, 24/7 all year. So they have these teams. All you got to do is just give them the artwork, and then all of a sudden it's like all over like
the place.
100 different things. So yeah, Vegas was pretty amazing for sure.
Cool. And out of all the websites that you worked on, obviously NPG Music Club would probably be your favorite, I guess, or was there other little projects or some of the other earlier sites? Was there any particular favorites there, or?
Yeah, I think definitely the NPG Music Club, in 2004 to 2006, I felt like we really got into a good groove with it. I got a Flash developer named Ash Warren to help out with some of the kind of heavy lifting with the Flash, and he really juiced it up a lot, made it very sharp. We started getting into more like mixing songs in the mixing console and having listening parties, and it was a good time. I really enjoyed that side at that time. I really felt like it was a vibrant community for sure.
Yeah, it was. I think that was one of the, in terms of Prince's online presence, I think that would be the pinnacle, and then I think things afterwards. But I think that was the one where it kind of brought the community together, and I loved playing on the mixing board. I remember doing that.
Right.
But one of the, I don't think he was involved in it, was the very old interactive CD. I've always wanted a copy of it, and it was only later on in life that I managed to get a copy of it, and I put it in my PC, and I was kind of reverse engineering it and going through the files, and and it was his embrace of technology was a massive influence on me and my career path. So I always and it was incredible that I learned a lot, and my skill set came from being a Prince fan.
Mhm.
So the Prince Online Museum, this was one of the big topics I'd like to talk to you about. How did that come about?
Well, I think it goes back to what you were saying about, people not giving Prince enough credit for the things that he did. I had been talking with some people about possibly doing it when he was still alive. And then when he passed, it just seemed like the perfect time to do it, because there were going to be plenty of people doing tributes about the best bass solo or best concert. Of course he deserves all that credit, but I wanted to be the advocate for this other part of his life, this other part of his culture. And I connected with all the other webmasters that I could find, and met with all of them, talked with them. They were all on board. So it was really just a labor of love, and I wanted to make sure that people understood there was no money being exchanged. We weren't doing any advertising on there. It was all just like completely 100% free, and it was just put up there like as a museum. Like, we just want to show this is what Prince did. This is a sort of snapshot of a moment in time, and do little mini interviews with the people involved and talk about what the thought process was, and just really kind of draw attention to this is something that he did, that this was an accomplishment of his, and it can easily get forgotten under the waves of Purple Rain nostalgia and all that.
Yeah.
So I really, like I said, I really wanted to be an advocate for Prince's digital pioneering.
Was it easy to track down all the previous webmasters? Was there like a handover process when you left Paisley Park or anything like that? Or
no, not really. When I ended my run, it was the end of 2007, and Prince had kind of said he was going to go on hiatus. He was going to take a break for a while, and that wound up not necessarily being true, but
never is.
Right. But then no, he brought on the Lotus Flower guys after me, and I never talked to them, never met with them or anything like that. But an interesting thing happened after he passed. I think people really started reaching out, and I talked to a ton of people who I hadn't spoken to in probably 10 years, and met a lot of new people too. And so I reached out to these people, and I said, hey, we have this shared experience, we should meet up and talk about it. And so I came out to LA, and I met the guys who did the Lotus Flower, talked to them, and I met with some of the people who did work on projects in Minneapolis. And I think there was just this sense of like, since he's passed, and now it's a finite group of people who've worked with him, it's not going to get bigger, that we have this kind of shared experience. We have this sense of community of people who got to be a part of something. And so everyone was really up for it. Everyone was really into it.
And sorry, again, geeky question, was it technically easy to put together in terms of all the back end stuff, and obviously the issues with Flash now and stuff like that?
It was challenging, because Flash is definitely out of style and going away, and
end of the year.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of Flash there, and we kind of made the choice to not update the technology. We wanted to keep it as is. So, for instance, like, none of it works on mobile.
No.
It's very very static, and very, this is how it was back then. So there are things that weren't going to work and things that weren't going to play out the same. And we tried to kind of rip out the database and just create static versions of things. So there's no dynamic content. It's all just sort of, this is how it was on this particular day, and that's the way it's going to be. So there were definitely some challenges, and I'm curious to see what the end of Flash is going to do to it.
Yeah, because I remember seeing it. I think it was either on Facebook or Twitter that I found it, and I was like, oh, and I remember looking at it, and it was like, oh, how amazing was that that you've brought together all the previous websites. And for one of my dissertations, I had to talk about preserving Wembley Stadium in a digital environment. So like, you're archiving history using technology. And I thought it was just an amazing thing to just, show the history and, like you said, appreciation of Prince's embrace of technology and online. So I thought it was an amazing idea. So my question is, has there been any talk with the estate of somehow using that on either their website or having something at Paisley Park that, that shows off the museum, the online museum?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. When we first put it up, it kind of there's still this active news cycle around Prince's death, so we got a lot of press for it, which was great. But it got the attention of the estate and the people who were there at the time, and they kind of took a frown to it and felt that it was, it wasn't authorized, it wasn't official, you should shut it down. And so we did make it dark for a period of time. But once there was a regime change and those people were gone, we just decided to put it back up. And I think the current people who are involved in the estate, they don't see it as a threat. They obviously were not making money off it. And of course, they own all the images and they own all the rights to them. And that's fine. But, I've been talking to them a little bit. And yeah, like, obviously things are evolving at Paisley. I think you talked to your team, talked to Alan about all the things that were going on over there. So, I think there's bigger plans underway. And so I think it's definitely possible at some point that the museum could be integrated and a part of it for sure.
Yeah, I'd love to see it as like a kiosk or a PC that you can then, and this is just me, throwing my ideas out there, of just, having like an area dedicated to his embracement of technology and, and showing off the previous websites and, the interactive CD-ROM that he did. I think that's, I think both me and you agree that it is part of his history that's not appreciated as much as it should be.
Yeah, and our logo is in the rug in one of the rooms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So people should know what it means.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a very valid point. That is a valid point. Yes. But and I've had this discussion within the fan community that a good revenue stream for the estate would be to bring back the NPG Music Club. So I don't know, has there been any discussions of that with you that you can talk about?
No, there hasn't been any discussions directly about that. It's interesting, like what would an NPG Music Club be in the world of streaming and the world of social media? It's certainly a very different paradigm now than it was back then. I mean, nowadays, official websites aren't really that important to a lot of artists even. So, official fan clubs, official websites, is that even a thing nowadays? And so there's some things to be thought through on that. And I think if I did get asked to do that, I think I would start with doing a lot of research and just talking to fans and trying to find out what they want and what would work for them.
Yeah, I think the conversations that I've had is that, a subscription model, because, you've got, subscription services now is a big thing, with online.
Yeah.
If the content's there that people want and they want access to, I think they'll be willing to pay, a monthly subscription. And, I think it'd be really good to bring back NPG Music, because obviously, there's stuff that we still haven't heard or seen, and, exclusive content online. I think, if you build it, they will come, kind of. That's my opinion anyway.
Right. Well, like we could have taken that Sign of the Times box set, and that could have lasted a whole year.
I think there's people still like going through it now.
Yeah.
We've got another upcoming podcast episode where we're going to, deconstruct what we've got, and there was unboxing videos, and there's a lot of stuff to still digest. And like you said, it's probably going to take another a year or so. So what are your current projects now, or what have you been up to, and what you've been doing?
Yeah, so after Prince, I went to go work with Pearl Jam for a while, and
that must have been amazing.
Yeah, that was fun. It was very different. I mean, they're very different musicians, and their approach to the internet was also very different, because they were kind of hands off. Like, I had to explain to them what Twitter was, and like how they shouldn't be afraid of it, and we weren't going to be tweeting out what Eddie Vedder had for lunch. So. Sorry about the lawnmower.
That's fine.
Lawnmower day. But so I've done a lot of different things since then. But more recently, I've started working with Avril Lavigne. She has a foundation that is actively raising awareness and money for to fight Lyme disease, and we're doing a benefit at the end of the month for a live stream benefit for her foundation.
Cool.
So
do you have a URL for that? If not, I can add it to the podcast.
Yeah, it's just at avrillavigne.com. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So that's been fun.
Oh, cool. So this is the other conversation I wanted to have with you about what are your thoughts about the internet and where do you think the technology is going and social media, your thoughts on social media?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think streaming has really been a game changer. I think we're in a time where it's not about buying music anymore. It's about having access to music. So we don't have these big, huge music collections necessarily like we used to. Now we just pay for access. And so I think that that's going to keep happening where, the whole idea of owning something is going to go away and it's just going to be paying for access. So, I think that there's good and bad to that, but I think, it's really great because for a lot of people, it allows them to listen to things and hear things that maybe they wouldn't have been able to get to before. For instance, like the Sign of the Times box set, everybody who has Spotify or iTunes or Tidal, they can all dig into it and listen to it and hear the remastered versions. And maybe they wouldn't have if it was just up to them to spend $150 on something like that. And so there's a lot of other music too, where I know if I hear something on the radio, I can go to Spotify, or even if on the playlist that they make too, like I could just find new music that way, new artists. Just seems a lot easier. And I think social media is part of that too. I think, the communities that we had on forums and message boards, it's just so much easier to do it on Facebook and Instagram. And, I feel connected to a lot of people in a way that I hadn't in quite a while since the message boards. There's kind of that gap there.
Yeah, I don't think I've been on a message board for probably about 5 years. Probably I've not. When it moved to Facebook and Twitter, it just, I remember building forums and PHP forums and stuff like that, and I remember how important it was to manage and stuff like that. And now it's just you just have Facebook groups and Facebook and stuff
it's
like
great. And you can connect with people that way. And also, I've noticed since the pandemic and all that there's been these online Twitch parties, which have been a lot of fun too. Like there's a few that I go to, and people just play Prince music and hang out and chat. And I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, we did one a couple of months ago. We did an online streaming Twitch party because obviously we do Prince party events and stuff. Right. And a lot of our fans and our community were like, we want, can you do something? So I managed to get some DJs and it was like, we can stream it on Twitch, and we did it on Twitch and there was no, copyright issues. Whereas Instagram and Facebook, as soon as the audio detects, it's cut off. So, and I think with the pandemic and everything, I think technology's evolved. I learned a lot just, working from home and stuff, and there was certain things that I couldn't do and I've kind of figured out during lockdown, which has been very interesting. But I think people have been a lot more productive, and I think, technology has evolved, and, who heard of Zoom before the pandemic? It's new technologies and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Before I forget, I know one of my co-presenters wanted to ask about the Rainbow Children 2 artwork or the album, if there was anything you can talk about that.
So I know he'd gotten he bought that illustration of himself, the one that people know, that kind of very angular illustration. He bought that illustration, and he contacted the artist to make one for his then wife Manuela. So he made one for her, And he gave it to me and he said, let's make that the cover of Rainbow Children 2. And I said, okay. But I mean, that was pretty common where he would just kind of give me things and say, I just want to see what it looks like, do a mock-up of what a potential cover could look like. That happened all the time. And I would say at least 3/4 of the time, like, it didn't go anywhere. So that was one of those projects where he had me work up some artwork, but I never saw a track list. I never saw any music for it. If he'd recorded something, I never heard it. So that's really, for me, that's as far as it went. I just did that cover of the album, and that was it.
Okay. In terms of going back to Prince, I always felt that he was very creative and he had a very good eye for art, and I felt that he was very good at art and he could be very, very creative. Was it very easy to work with him? Was it very easy to bounce off of him and the creative process? How was that with him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously Prince cared a lot about his visual presentation. You could definitely see that through his whole career, with fashion, with his tours, with his videos and movies. So, I always felt that, like, when it came to the graphic design stuff, if he knew Photoshop, like, I wouldn't be there, because, like, he would much rather just do it all himself. He had ideas, he had strong opinions, and he was more than happy to kind of sit there and, change this, change that, move that around. I like that font, I don't like that font. So he was very hands-on, and I think that our working relationship worked out really well, because I was willing to kind of defer to his vision. Like, I wasn't going to get a big ego about it and say, well, I think it should be like this, and argue with him. It was more like, well, if that's what you want, your name's going on it, so let's do it, and try to make something that he's happy with. So yeah, I mean, he was very involved, and I like that. I like people who are very upfront about their opinions. I don't like wishy-washy, or it's like, you like it, you don't like it, you hate it, you want me to do it over, I can handle that.
Yeah, I've had things when I've designed stuff and you present it and they don't like it, but they don't tell you what they don't like or how you can fix it. And it's like you do multiple designs until it's like, all right, they like that. So yeah, I can definitely relate. But I always said, and I've said this to other people in the community, that I feel that there was a graphic designer in him.
Yeah.
That could have been a career path for him. Obviously, we were granted with his musical genius, but I could, his whole career, I could always feel that he had a graphic design and a very good eye for detail, and even the smallest detail. So yeah, is there anything else you would like to? Is there anything else that you've got coming up, or anything apart from?
No, that's about it. Hopefully I'll continue that relationship with Sony, and we can do more reissues. It'd be great if they put out the Chocolate Invasion and Slaughterhouse CDs.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask. Is that, yeah, it'd be great to get, because obviously it was digital. It'd be great to see them come together as some package as well.
Yeah, I'd really love to put together something, kind of an expanded thing where, I could sort of put together a whole package with it, where it talks about the club and shows some of the sketches of how these things evolved, and just talks about that period of time. It'd be great if they are up for that project. Hopefully they are.
Well, hopefully they're listening, so I'm sure it might happen. It's been an absolute pleasure. Do you want to give out your website details and your social media details so people can follow you? And
yeah, people can always go to my website at samjennings.com, and everything's there. Or you can find me online at samjennings3000 on Instagram and Facebook. So yeah, that's samjennings.com is where I'm at.
And that's where I've been cyber stalking you.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Sam. It's been an absolute pleasure. And sorry if I was geeking out too much, or
no problem. You're great.
You've been a hero of mine.